real coding lecture in ITEC 320, and we are going to be covering types in Ada. So this is our typical Ada blank procedure stored in class 1.80b, and I've added in one extra include to allow us to use floating point input and output in our program. Now we have to pre-declare our variables before we use them in Ada. And the syntax we use is name, colon, and then type. And then I can assign a value down here, and to output the value, we do something along this lines. Now, this put and put underscore line are the two different methods for outputting variables in Ada. Put underscore line only accepts strings, so we have to convert our integer variable into a string variable by using the single tick and then, or the apostrophe, and then an img. Now, if we have other types in Ada, such as floating point numbers, we also have positive numbers, and we also have natural numbers. Now, one of the reasons for this lecture and getting into positive and natural numbers is the fact that Ada has a very, very strict type model, and it allows us to have values be stored in particular areas and only have particular values in a range stored in a specific variable. So, for example, if I were to say a colon equals -1, and then look at what happens when we compile this, we're going to see that we got a value not in range of type standard.natural, because natural numbers have to be 0 or greater, whereas positive numbers have to be greater than 0. And if we run this, it will indeed give us a constraint error, because it had a range check. So Ada forces values to fit into a specific range. And we can see now it's perfectly fine. Now, you may be noticing that there is considerable space allocated here for this particular variable. And that is just due to the natural way that integers are output in Ada. If you want to get away with that, you have to set the width attribute, in other words, the column width that this uses, and then we go from there. If you want to make sure these are on different lines, you can add in a new line. So here we can see how integers are used, positive and natural numbers as well. Characters are the same as we would see in other languages. And lastly, let's look at a floating point number. Now, one thing we have to be careful with is if we try to assign y's value into x in Java or in some languages, it would simply truncate the value. However, in Ada, it does not work because these are completely different types. So in this case, it expected type float and it found an integer. So we have to be very careful with how we are converted the wrong line. Apologies. Now if you notice, this rounded the value for us. So you have to be very careful as what you are using when you are converting. This is a brief lesson on the different types in ADA. Now we can assign the values and casting between one type and another and looking at the output for them.